Alright, before I start this video, I just want to give a disclaimer. If you watch this video, I'm assuming that you have at least listened to the album that I'm reviewing, as well as a little bit of Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum and Hawaii Part 2, because there are some songs in this album that are very similar to the originals, and so I don't go as in-depth on them, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows what I'm talking about when I'm talking about those songs. Also, a huge trigger warning for suicide, mental illness, racism, and themes of self-harm. If you are triggered by any of those things, please click off the video now. I care way more about your well-being than I care about whether or not you watch this video. I just want to make sure everybody out there is staying safe. So with that being said, let's get right into it.
Hey, editing wet blanket here. Want to let you guys know that I have a speech impediment, so sometimes I don't say words good, so sometimes my mouth gets a little blah, and I know that at the beginning of this video, I literally say Marvelin's Marvelous, so yeah, enjoy the video. Do it.
I have no idea how he did it, but somehow Chonny Jash was able to breathe new life into two of my favorite albums of all time, Marvelin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum and Hawaii Part 2, among other songs. Though I may do an analysis on the source material someday as well, those already exist, and you should watch them. They're really good. But y'all, for all the well-deserved hype this album has received, I really haven't seen basically anybody talking about it in depth here on YouTube. And since I'm not a talented animator or artist, I'm going to give back to the fanbase the best way I can. Through info dumping. Yes, I'm Wet Blanket, and on this channel I talk about things that I love that I feel haven't gotten enough commentary attention. So, let's start the conversation. In March of 2023, an artist already quickly rising in popularity tried something relatively new and bold. See, Chonny Jash, who is one of the funniest names to date in my opinion, was a big fan of Tally Hall and felt inspired by their work to do a reimagination album of some of the band's biggest hits, tied in with songs from lead singer Joe Hawley's solo album, aforementioned Hawaii Part 2 as well. There's a reason why I'm not calling these songs covers or parodies here, as so many others have done. While neither term is entirely wrong, I feel like neither of them give Chonny proper credit for what he did. One person was able to recreate instrumentals, add impressive vocal layering, and write extremely intelligent lyrics to already existing and well-beloved songs. This took him, in his own words, approximately 547 hours. And to think I was complaining about making a longer video. In my opinion, a good majority of these tunes are on par with the originals in terms of quality and depth. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, I'll stop with the introduction and get to the actual point of the video. Here is my track-by-track analysis of Connie's Charming Chaos Compendium Volume 1. And you'll notice that sometimes I'm calling him Connie, and sometimes I'm calling him Chonny. There's a lot of dispute within the fandom about which one it is, so I'm kind of just going to be defaulting to both based on what comes out of my mouth, so I apologize for that in advance. Some context, okay? Quadruple C is widely regarded as a story about one person split into three: mind, heart, and soul. In Jash's music videos, Mind is seen wearing blue lipstick, Heart has purple lipstick and is blind, and Soul wears red lipstick. However, there's also a fourth character, the Whole, or the individual that results when all three sides are working in well-balanced tandem. It's important to note that all the three parts are not supposed to be split, and when they are, it means that something has gone awry or there has been dissonance within. I also wanted to note that Jash himself, who had been working on these reimaginations since 2022, said that he didn't initially intend for these songs to have plurality or system-alter relationships in mind, but this album has been a huge source of comfort for the DID community, and he is fully in support for that interpretation as well. Though that is not the interpretation I'll be using for this video, since I don't have enough knowledge on DID to be able to speak on it with confidence, I thought the fact that this album makes so many folks feel less alone is another amazing reason to go listen to it. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about the characters and the process I'm using to analyze this piece. Oh, and just a reminder that this is my personal interpretation and not gospel from the horse's mouth. Okay, now let's go. Our first character that I'm going to talk about is Mind. Mind is most often regarded as cynical, cold, arrogant, and analytically minded. In many of their songs, in fact, the idea of succumbing to the cold is made to be their goal for the vessel. Though he doesn't pay much credence to emotions on the surface, he is actually very quick to only one: anger. Overall, his motivations are to banish emotions entirely in order to live what he sees as a logical, successful, and productive life. Then we have Heart. Heart is sad. Real sad. He represents the necessary burden of carrying emotions as strong and volatile as love and hate. He is physically blind, which could be interpreted in many ways. Some believe that Mind quite literally blinded them forcefully, because I totally forgot to mention that, yeah, they hate each other, but I personally also like the interpretation that this is due to the saying that love is blind. Either way you slice it, it's just an interesting little tidbit. Though Heart is burdened by always feeling everything all of the time, he also represents the importance of emotions and has even been referred to by the others as the unofficial leader of the whole. It's also important to note that Mind is represented by the sun and Heart is represented by the moon. And then we have Soul. Soul is the embodiment of Mom and Dad are fighting again. Though he is technically a representation of the host himself, he's tired, man. He's the glue that's holding this family together, and he's sick of the constant cycles of fighting. But don't let the fatigue fool you, though. He is the strongest out of the three parts, and he knows it too. He's acutely aware of the fact that Heart and Mind rely on him in order to keep the vessel alive. His motivation is to stop the fighting at any cost necessary. And I mean any cost. I'll give you guys a little bit of a roadmap here. Each different character has a corresponding voice. Mind is pitched lower, Heart has no editing at all, and Soul is more highly auto-tuned and robotic. Though, if you don't want to break an ear trying to listen to who's singing what, you can look no further than the chart Jash made us himself. In his Taken for a Ride music video, there is a sudden flash of a whiteboard that, when captured, contains all the songs on the Quadruple C album color-coded. These colors correspond directly with each character's lipstick color, overlapping when there are multiple main focuses and being colored black when the whole is singing. I received this photo as well as a lot of help for this video from a Google Doc created by a Redditor that for the life of me I can't find anymore. This screenshot is all I have left because I saved it back when I first listened to the album before I even knew I would have a YouTube channel, let alone make this video. I've since then closed the tab and have not been able to find the comment that linked to the document. If anybody has any idea who deserves the credit, please comment below because this was genuinely a huge help and I want to give credit. Oh, and also thank you to the lovely folks at Genius Lyrics, as always. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's carve out the story track by track. The first song is Time Machine Reprise. The album starts with a reprise, which normally wouldn't make much sense, but in this album, you're going to learn that the devil is in the details. A reprise in a musical or opera is a song that is a continuation of a pre-existing song using different words but the same basic motif in order to complete a thought or a scene. This is why it seems to make no sense that an album starts with one until you consider the first couple lines of the song.
No, I'm not listening. What's future, what's history? What's happened will be, and repeat.
Repeat, Yes, it seems like this album is the start, or rather restart, of a cycle. Not only that, but it seems that all parties are aware and afraid of this cycle. This further drives home the fact that splits aren't supposed to happen. Personally, I believe that despite protests from Heart and Mind, Soul is the only one that could have split them because he realizes that the only way to solve the dissonance is to let things play out physically. This is further backed in the line, keeping up this pace of keeping still. What they're doing right now isn't working. Verse 2 and 3 seem to be foreshadowing what's to come, or rather, what caused the split. He talks about trying all afternoon to write a song that he couldn't quite get right, much like what happens way later in the album in Hidden in the Sand. If it can be believed that this is an example of the dissonance that caused the split, then that further proves that this is a cycle, or something that happens quite often and has happened before. Soul is mentioning things that, in the listener's mind, haven't even happened yet, proving that this has all happened before. The refrain touches on the subject of purchasing identity, which is something that Soul is always striving for. All he wants to do is finally be himself, and he will keep repeating this cycle as many times as necessary until all three parts can live as one permanently. In the outro of the song, the music cuts out with Soul asking where beat 1 is. I interpret this to mean that Soul is considering what would be the perfect place to start in order to settle this dispute. The second song is called Dream, outro from Calamity.
Just really quickly, I know that Soul's voice is the only one that's heard in this part, but I think that what Soul is saying is coming from the other side's internal dialogue.
Calamity is an event causing great and often sudden damage or distress, or a disaster. And oh boy, does this song deliver on that front. These motherfuckers are saying a lot of shit all at once, so let's break it down. The whole beginning is split, and there's no one voice for the first minute or so of the song. Some of the highlights are endlessly, helplessly, ceaselessly, callously, senselessly, tactlessly, fractally, haplessly. These words provide more proof that not only is this a never-ending cycle, but they're splitting. More things that prove the cycle theory are, I don't know if I could go another round of cacophony. And who to be when we unleash all these harmonies maladies? Old, sick. These lyrics do some major black and white phrases that relate to our characters, and I will try to pick out said fragments as best as I can. Some things that Heart says is, haptically grappling me, backing the apathy. That's a Just Apathy reference, which is a song that comes later in the album. My sympathy's draining me dry, stats are the adversary, and logic will rot in me. And this is a reference to Heart literally rotting in a hole later in the album. How much deeper can they dig my sunken eyes? We know that Heart is blind. Some things that Mind says are, happenings hardly seem happening insanity, because insanity isn't based in logic. Friends are insanity. Feelings still claw at me, and that's Mind seething at Heart for trying to shoot him. Trying holistically, failing consistently. That's Mind's obsession with failure due to emotions. Some things that Soul says is, dissonance will grow as the grays start to fall from me. Won't they just let me writhe inside and let my sides aside so they can realize to let me die, that'd be fine? This is all foreshadowing Soul trying to end the vessel. At least then I'd finally hear silence and sleep well one night. Heart and Mind together seem to sing, and here we are, sopping wet. Victim and culprit entwine in one entity. Mind and Heart, crying, dying, covered in our blood and sweat, threefold. Now we sit, intermit, flail and flit, chip and hack bit by bit. I am the murderer. I am the fatality. After this dose of calamity, Soul begins lamenting the circumstances. He acknowledges that Mind and Heart are all black and white with no ability to compromise or even listen. Soul is angry and frustrated, asking, what do they think this is? He believes that this will be the undoing of the vessel. The next song is Mucka Blucka, Intro to Cacophony. Cacophony is a harsh, discordant mixture of sounds, aka they're beginning to split. My god, this song is so fun, but also I had to look up a lot of big words. This song is kind of like the true introduction to our characters. It's fun, cheeky, and gives us a good idea of what we're working with. It also has a shit ton of foreshadowing, so we know that at this time at least, all of the parts are aware that this has happened before. We will get to whether or not this remains the case, but for right now, everyone knows what's going down. This whole song is set up like a show, or to put it more accurately, a game show.
Now I'm just fucking with ya. What up, motherfuckers? You ever seen anyone lose their mind on mic? Come on in. Grab a seat, grab a cuppa, and watch the trip bat his third strike.
I just love how this part makes so much light of the fact that outside of this vessel, there is a man genuinely losing his mind. I've always been one for making light of grim situations, and that kind of juxtaposition always makes me laugh. After this, we get Mind calling Heart a coward, Heart comparing himself to the rock-bearing Sisyphus, and then Mind foreshadowing that he is the mechanical hands. They both chant, let's see how fierce this auction gets, implying that they are both trying to gain control of the host. There's also a super cool this has all happened before moment in the lines, so when we come back again and the start becomes the end, consider this lamentation a forward. And there's probably subtext, are you picking it up? It's a metaphor for, ha, who gives a fuck? In the interlude, all four characters have a line. There's a me stuck underground, which is Heart, a me left on the shelf, which is Mind, a me that gets paraded, which is Soul, and the me that's shown to everyone else, which is Whole. After that, there's a bunch more Mind-Heart fighting moments and a Just a Friend reference, but the real foreshadowing comes when the song suddenly gets serious.
Right as I missed my eyes in a mist, I finally realized I shot at myself. The reflection of the else, the disconnection, the side of the coin at once withheld.
This is foreshadowing for what the fans lovingly call the Juno incident. Keep that in mind, but for now, let's move on. Next comes Never Meant to Know and Spring and a Storm. I won't be analyzing the lyrics to these since these two songs are the only ones largely unchanged from their Tally Hall counterparts. However, that doesn't mean that they aren't important. If we know two things about Jash, it's that he's devilishly handsome and also very intentional. That means everything unchanged is unchanged for a reason. Just know that narratively, I believe both songs are to signify the harmonious vessel that Soul hopes to achieve from this split. Soul wants everyone to just get along. He wants everyone to accept each other despite their flaws so they can be one human being. It's also implied that during these two songs, Mind and Heart are forgetting that they've been here before, and their goals are being shifted instead towards their hatred for one another. The last thing to note is that the ending part of Spring in a Storm is cut off from the rest of it in this version. That's because it's a Mouska tool that will come in handy later. Then we have Night. This one is also a song about the splitting of the parts, but now Mind and Heart are completely unaware of the fact that this has happened before. In verse 1, the line, "We ought to leave a light on underneath the moon," implies that Heart had primary control in the past, since he is the moon. The line, "Sitting in the sight of every eye, I can feel them stew," is implying that there is a present dissonance and that the aforementioned control is about to be subject to change. The verse finishes with this line split between Heart and Mind. Heart says, "Open the window, look out and see," and then Mind finishes the sentence with, "Me. Slow, I am coming a long way to be." Some people believe that Mind is cutting Heart off in this phrase because of the way one voice fades into the other. However, I believe this is Heart loosening his grip on the vessel, leaving room for Mind to take control. Verse 2 begins with these lyrics, "An accidental item, such as I am mother's only son. Ever is the light on ever meant to run." I believe that this is the outside musing of Jash himself, or the whole, since the album is taking place within him. He is lamenting the fact that though he is only supposed to be one person, or mother's only son, he instead keeps splitting into three, or the light, whether that be of the sun or moon, keeps running, leaving him in cacophony. The verse ends quite fittingly with this exchange. Mind says, "Cold, but I'm outside and waiting to see," and Heart says, "A glow in the snow coming closer to me." Now this makes sense because, as I've said before, Mind equates himself with the cold, and right now he feels he's on the outside looking in, yet growing closer. If you didn't understand the building plot by now, the chorus helps you out by giving you a quick refresher. Tonight I'm arriving alive and alight. Tonight all the black and the gray and the white. Heart and Mind are examples of black and white thinking respectively, while Soul is a gray area, constantly stuck in the middle of it. This last bit, I believe, symbolizes the impending power struggle. And I want to be like, you are the one light. I want to see your eyes looking back and out through mine. Verse 3 is a Soul verse, and it gives a lot of context. Better when the light comes in the nighttime, opening the door. Hoping to be right, it's open every night, so what you waiting for? Open your window, look out and see them. Tines stabbed through eyes that the sides has condemned. This verse is Soul pleading for the fighting to stop, since the door is always open for Mind to return. He then makes note of Heart's blindness, which also adds credibility to the theory that Heart was forcefully blinded with sharp objects stabbing him, most likely from Mind. The bridge includes a dialogue between Heart and Soul, with Mind interjecting. Though Soul caused the split to happen, it is clear now that Mind is our antagonist. Or, at least, in my eyes, right now, it seems like Soul is more likely to empathize with Heart than Mind. That is until the Juno incident. We are now to ruler of everything, and things change rapidly. Why do you ask? Well, let's just let Mind and Soul, now eerily singing together, explain it.
Juno was mad, you knew it'd been hot, so we shot at the sun with a gun. Shot at the sun with a gun. Always shot at his wily one, only friend. Listen to this, he shot and he missed, about what he deserved. Prison all that he earned, so let's stop him, see if he learns the goddamn thing.
Heart Heart, who before seemed like a timid and sad creature, was secretly scheming to put an end to the dissonance once and for all. If Mind wasn't going to listen, then Heart was going to make him. He was going to avenge himself and his lost eyes. He pulled out a gun and fired only one shot. And he missed. Mind, now brought to a seething anger, imprisoned the now shocked and defenseless Heart in the very hole Heart had intended to bury Mind in after he had passed. Now, there are many theories as to what this could represent. No one knows how the heck a vestige of one's person was able to obtain a gun, or what properties the gun had. For this reason, a lot of people interpret the Juno incident as attempted suicide, though I personally believe it's more impactful if Soul is the only one with the power to do so, since he is the closest to Jash himself. It also evens out the power dynamic a little more, since Soul is a little less outspoken, but ultimately more powerful than the other two. I think the reason that Heart was able to shoot Mind was probably for the same reason that Mind was able to obtain two sharp objects to stab Heart's eyes out, and also the same reason why Heart was able to dig a hole in the ground for Mind. It's because, ultimately, they're figments of Jash's imagination. So suspend your disbelief a little bit, goddammit! The rest of the song uses the same lyrics as the original Tally Hall version, but with different significance that provides more lore, especially in the chorus. When the chorus mentions the mechanical hands that rule everything, it's obviously making mention of Mind, who is now going to be able to fully take control now that Heart is imprisoned. However, there's more. In order to understand the reference to robot arms, we need to go to a completely different Connie Jash cover, The Man with the Skeleton Arms. This theory is a little bit of a stretch, but I really like it, so I'm going to talk about it. So, The Man with the Skeleton Arms is about two hooligans that start a wildfire. After the fire dies out, they find a man who has been badly burned. While trying to lift him up and help him, they accidentally rip off his charred arms, and the armless man swears revenge on the foolish boys. A lot of Jash fans believe that this cover, created around the same time as the rest of the album covers were, signifies an event that happened in a past cycle. We already know that in one cycle, Mind gouged out Heart's eyes, and in the current cycle, Heart shot at Mind. But what if Mind gouged out the eyes to settle a score? Yes, the theory states that the two boys in the skeleton arms represent Heart and Soul, and they both ripped Mind's arms off in a past cycle. This would explain why Mind has mechanical hands, or perhaps a new set of prosthetic arms. It would also explain why Soul is so willing to side with Heart up until this point in the current cycle. I mean, it's either this or mechanical hands is just a metaphor for Mind's cold, heartless, and robotic nature, and Soul just likes Heart better because he's nicer and less controlling, generally speaking. Either way, we are led to the same conclusion, prosthetic limbs or not. Heart made a miscalculation, whether or not that be attributed to his blindness, and now he's locked away, leaving Soul alone with Mind. The first two lyrics of verse 4 consist of Mind making fun of Heart's decidedly stupid plan. The last line is Heart trying to justify his importance in the system, finishing with Mind laughing at him. It's important to mention that Heart mentions a wife, which is in reference to a love interest that the Whole currently has that will come relevant later. I have a wonderful life, I have a powerful job, she criticizes me for being egocentric. Verse 5 is Mind trying to call Heart's bluff on the perceived importance of what he does. Mind believes that Heart is simply trying to make excuses for his fatigue and depression instead of doing anything about it. He thinks that Heart is useless, lazy, and should be replaced, not understanding the gravity of what he has to carry every day. In verse 6, Mind also believes that Heart uses his emotion not because he's actually feeling them, but as manipulation. Heart then tries to plead with Mind that his emotions are indeed genuine. I pin you, I know you, your facade is a scam. You know, you're making me cry, this is the way that I am. I can't help but feel a little bit bad for Heart at this point, though whether or not he's actually being manipulative is at this point left up to the interpreter. The bridge of this song remains largely the same except for a couple of words. With an "oh my god, I've got to get out of here," while I have another word to sell, another story to tell, another timepiece ringing the bell. Notice that Heart says while instead of the original or, implying that Heart is afraid of what Mind is capable of doing to him, and he feels he needs to speak out before he no longer can. I also wanted to note the last blurb in the bridge. Know you know it must be never ending, comprehend if you can, but when you try to pretend to understand, you resemble a fool, although you're only a man, so give it up and smile. Some fans interpret this as Hart admitting he's manipulative, but I don't quite see it that way because if Hart were being manipulative, he definitely wouldn't be smiling. He would be using his old sad and depressed shtick. However, I think that this is Hart giving up on trying to change Mind's perception of him. He knows that the more he tries to explain, the more Mind sees him as a fool. However, he doesn't quite understand his fatigue himself, so he opts to give it up and smile. The final chorus further solidifies that Hart has begun to give up, even going as far as to sing the final refrain with Mind declaring him the ruler of everything. And this leads us to the Hart Saga, which starts with a song called Good Day. Good Day is a Hart song, and admittedly not my favorite at first, though through analyzing it, I've now grown a new appreciation for it. I see the first verses of this song as Hart pleading with Mind to let him out. He claims it's rare that he's even trying to communicate in the first place, which is one of Hart's biggest red flags. He then reveals his true motive, that he doesn't want to be alone with his thoughts. He says, "The bad thoughts will return, and so you know I can't really stay." I wanted to play verse 2 in its entirety because I believe that it's Hart trying to explain his depression to Mind, the it in question being depression respectively.
Its name I hate to call it, likes to say it's nothing. It's nothing, I'm just tired. It lives and breathes and it insists that it is something. It never likes to speak or run or walk or breathe or eat. Instead it creeps at night and sneaks on in and festers while you sleep.
The chorus fleshes out his experience with mental illness as well. Now, verse 3 gets dark. Hart realizes that Mind isn't listening to his pleas or explanations, so he's willing to resign. He even makes allusions to taking his own life, however, he's still being made to sing anyway, now against his will. In chorus 2, though he knows no one is listening anyway, the Hart goes on to talk about the low success rate of the mental health meds he's been taking, and again the burden of extreme emotion. This is shown in the line, "The meds aren't that helpful, it's hard to stay half full, when all you feel is anger and spite." The bridge represents Hart feeling dejected by the fact that Mind doesn't know nor care about his suicidal ideation, saying, "I thought you knew, I knew about why I wanted to die and say goodbye. I wanted you to know, I thought you knew by why and by and why." The outro is a last-ditch effort to appeal to Mind, and Hart decides to try to be happy. This is fake happiness, of course, and despite Hart singing about boundless joy and freedom from negativity, it doesn't work. Which leads us to our next song in the Hart Saga, titled Just Apathy. Okay, just to get this out of the way, I know some people think this is a soul song based on the gray lyrics in the official lyric video, but the patent-pending roadmap whiteboard had it in purple, plus contextually it makes more sense for Hart to sing this in my opinion, so if you think it's a soul song, it is still completely possible to interpret it that way, and I've even seen some good interpretations of it, but for the sake of this video, I'm analyzing it as a Hart song with a Mind feature. Verse 1 states, "It's too much or not enough. Maybe this whole goddamn song's messed up, and anyway, maybe this is just another waste of time. Waiting around for something better, analyzing every letter, flitting back and forth, every chord and every half-assed rhyme." Hart, now completely alone, is dejected and sings about how much he hates his relationship with Mind and how he wishes Mind would just listen to him for once. In doing this, he's not realizing that he has never listened to Mind either. This feeling of falling on deaf ears is reflected in the chorus, but surprise, surprise, Mind decides to engage in the conversation, albeit just to hold a moral high ground. He claims Hart is acting like a kid and has been had, but not by him, implying that Hart's mental illness is the sole reason for his undoing. Mind then instructs Hart to continue acting like everything is okay in order to combat these perceived flaws. In the second chorus, the pair sings together, exchanging I with you, respectively. However, it's growing clear that Hart is starting to resent Mind's constant patronization in the line, "But don't you dare pity me." The bridge states, with the pair still singing together, "I'm sick and tired of holding fire when all I feel is violence, and I'm only happy when all I see is the back of my eyelids, black, immaculate, patterned silence." They're sick of fighting, but they feel there's no other choice. When Hart mentions black patterned silence, he is referring to using sleep as an escape. But when Mind is referring to black patterned silence, it's his way of thinking his way of being is the only way to truly live, since he's the one associated with the color black. The outro spells out both of the sides' views perfectly. Hart says, "All I know will soon turn to dust." And Mind replies, "And yet you claim my apathy's not just." Neither of them conceding to listen to each other. And with that, we have the Hart acoustic. The first of the three, let's call them electric features, Hart's rendition opens with a smooth, jazzy, yet sleepy instrumental introduction that fits his overall mood quite well in my opinion. It is, well, acoustic compared to the others. Wow, it's almost like the name fits. Verse 1 starts strong with, "Think of these thoughts as hackneyed and trite, cliched, depraved, disturbing, and contrived, shallow, cold, wretched, miserable, dark, and any other adjective." If we are to believe that these words follow the just apathy conversation, then I believe this is Hart reflecting on how Mind feels about his disposition. It also feels that, while being locked up, Hart has no choice but to wallow in his despair. The second verse doubles down on this idea, with Hart reflecting on Mind's patronization. "Choose to sit safely out of the sun, away from rays so blinding to the eye, singing songs someone's already sung, averting gaze from beautiful light." These words are a near exact replication of how Mind feels about Hart, believing he's doing no actual work, his ideas are tired, and even implying that being locked up was Hart's own choice and that he is faulty for not wanting to live Mind's way. Verse 3 goes as follows, "But as complacency settles, and anxieties will arise, and part this soul as Jekyll parted Hyde." This refers to the split being caused by dissonance within that led them here. I also will say that Chonny Jash in his music makes a lot of references to Jekyll and Hyde. He even has two amazing songs that you should check out called The Ballad of Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde Jive, and I really like how he's found so much resonance in these characters because of how they split, just like he does. The verse finishes with, "Now I'm but half of a hollow man's lies, the love, the hate, the emotional side." Hart, again, doesn't like to be split. All of this emotion is too much for one fragment to bear. He is also using this line to grieve the loss of his importance in the system because now he's just seen as the defective one. The bridge is Hart again attempting to justify his rightful place, saying that life cannot be controlled by digits or lived based on cold logic alone. He continues his justification in verse 4 with the line, "I know that I'm weak, I know that I'm vile, but sometimes that is needed to survive. That's what I'll say to rationalize I'm needed if we are to stay alive. Emotions, while heavy, are necessary for motivation and fulfillment." He finishes the thought by acknowledging that Mind's plan to control the soul and vessel will ultimately fail, and perhaps even be terminally detrimental. In the second bridge, Hart again anxiously pleads with Mind to stop and forgive him for the Juno incident so that they can work things out, saying, "I beg of thee, have mercy on me. I am just a boy, you see. I plead of thee, have sympathy for me." In the chorus, Hart works himself into an anxious frenzy as his thoughts become too much for him to bear. He can sense the soul starting to dim and rot and blames himself for shooting at Mind and ending up imprisoned. He says, "See how the mind tricks the soul into being something sickly, dead, and cold. As you feel it start to tire and fester so slowly up until the point where it will finally die. Just in time to see what could have been." After his anxiety reaches a fevered pitch, he realizes something. Mind is still not listening. He's getting what he wants. So whether it be to protect himself from the guilt he is now racked with, or just because he's resigning in typical Hart fashion, he spells out his newfound radical carelessness in the outro. "Do what you want, you automaton freak. No, I can no longer bring myself to care. This hollowed out vessel's beginning to creak, so take control, let's see how you fare." With that, we are brought into the Mind saga. This saga starts with Be Born. This song is one of my favorites, and it's also fucking brutal. It's pretty much about Mind quite literally and figuratively talking down to Hart, who is still currently in a hole. Mind chastises Hart for his depression and instability, while Mind's words are glitching and stuttering, showing he's far from stable himself. He even goes as far as to make fun of Heart for choosing to cover pre-existing songs or songs that someone's already told, which adds a layer of fourth wall breaking that I thought was a nice creative touch. Speaking of creative touches, can we please talk about that absolutely gnarly piano lick in verse 3?
I feel it growing more.
Goddamn, Connie, you are a genius. Despite literally singing the textbook villain song, and yes, that is a huge compliment, villain songs are always the best, Mind goes into great lengths to convince Heart that he is actually the one in the right here, and that Heart should just relinquish control once and for all if he actually cares about the vessel he resides within. He claims that Heart's depression is merely a sickened lens, blinding him to reality and accountability. So many lyrics in this song go incredibly hard, especially in the choruses like these ones.
What if I told you
You are not the victim, and justice fucking wants you to believe home. What if I told you no one here is listening? What if I told you that is for the best?
God, that harmony is just mwah. Sorry, Mind's voice just scratches my autism just right. At the end, Mind gives Heart an ultimatum. Be ours, his and Soul's, I presume, or die. Before I talk about the rest of the Mind saga, I just need to tell y'all something that may put things into more perspective on a personal level. Remember that all of these entities reside inside of one person. Now, as someone who struggles with mental illness, I so fucking get it. I've been Heart and Mind to unhealthy extremes, and I bet we all could relate to that. They are the prime example of the side of you that suffers and the side of you that hates yourself for suffering. The side of you that just wants to slow down and feel everything, even to the unhealthy extent of not being able to do anything else, but also the side of you that so desperately wants you to get over it. Sure, laying in bed all day every day to rot isn't healthy, but neither is boiling things down and invalidating your own emotions. Both are paths to inevitable disaster, and that's what Chonny is doing here. Keep in mind that the idea behind this album is being whole, and that means neither of these sides are entirely in the right or the wrong. This album is about inner compromise and acceptance. With that in mind, let's keep going. Storm and a Spring. The opening of this song appears to be Mind trying to recall a time where the vessel felt emotion, particularly through music, but he doesn't quite get it. Instead of continuing to try to grasp the concept of using music as an expressional outlet, he grows bored of the idea, saying it's nothing fucking new and that no one was listening or caring about the music anyway. Despite this though, it seems like Mind really is trying to figure out how this emotional lyricism thing works. However, in the verse, all the rain comes down the same, but not a drop can stake its claim. Down they pour with millions more to the floor with no name. The rain is meant to represent Mind's words falling flat, not quite being able to convey anything correctly or emotionally. Music, as much as Mind hates to admit it, was Heart's domain, and it just isn't the same without him. Knowing this deep down, Mind does what he does best and then shifts blame onto Heart instead. Remember, he believes Heart only uses emotions as a mean to manipulate, and he doesn't actually feel any of them. He stresses this idea in the line, "I'm sure you're really saying your heart out," or "I'm sure that's how it seemed." But you and I both know so well now that looks can be deceiving. The looks can be deceiving part could also be in reference to the fact that Mind maintains that he is not the bad guy here. Deep down, he is just stressed and trying to become one again and help Soul in the best way he knows how. Do with that explanation what you will. He then starts talking about how Heart didn't actually try his best when he was the head of the vessel because, in his eyes, Heart's depression caused him to grow lazy. Heart then chimes in to ask Mind what he sees behind his dead leaden eyes. Mind then explains that he sees a soul that's deep and dark and eternally cold. This is the soul that Mind wants because to him, Heart broke a promise. The promise to stay whole. For this reason, Mind thinks that he is the rightful leader of the vessel. He tells Heart that he thinks they would all surely die if they were under his control for much longer due to his perceived weak-willed laziness. Mind also makes it very clear that he believes he can do it without Heart, but Heart can't do it without him. referencing the ultimatum he gave in the previous song. Verse 7 states, "So if you insist on crying while our host is slowly dying, then I'll cut you loose and spare this noose the dead weight." I believe this confirms that the death Mind mentions in the ultimatum wasn't the death of the vessel, but instead the death of Heart, as Mind will kill him. This only further proves that Mind believes he doesn't need anyone but Soul, which is clearly untrue, as we saw Mind struggling at the beginning of the song with tasks that Heart could do so easily. Remember the mouse tool I said we'd use later? Well, here it is. Now, the bridge of this song is confusing and uses a lot of big words, so I'll do my best to break it down. Essentially, the brain is starting to lose it. He's hurling insults at not only Heart now, but the system itself. He is damning everything. He says that the Trident, or the three of them, are both motivation to push forward when working together, but also a weapon of self-destruction when split. He's grappling with whether those ends justify the means, and he's still mad at the fact that he's singing songs that have already been sung because he thinks it lacks creativity, which, as we have seen so far, is entirely incorrect. He once again maintains that they will never go back to the way things were before, saying never again. But the song, though Mind has regained confidence, stops abruptly, proving that there's still plenty of room for error in this plan, and leading us to the end of the Mind saga, with the Mind Electric. This is by far the most popular song on the album, and for good reason. It fucking slaps. Mind is continuing to lose his shit and falls deeper into anger, which again is the only emotion he knows how to feel. He starts the verse by quoting the insults Heart had used for him in previous songs. "Freakish and dismal, hollow and bleak. I could go on, but let's leave it there." He then uses these insults as an excuse to tear into Heart harder than he ever did before, calling him feeble and frail, but also stating that he equates Heart, and specifically emotions, to a disease that needs to be destroyed for the betterment of the vessel. He tells Heart that his cries are nothing more than pathetic attempts at rebellious outbursts, and that he hardly resembles a man at all. Mind is going full mask off at this point and revealing his true intentions to purge all emotion outright. He believes that emotion is the only thing that's holding them back from being all that they could be, and that logic is the absolute. His goal to be whole remains the same, but now it's much darker. He wants a pristine soul, one without lazy, dirty emotions. He wants to kill Heart, and is now set on doing so. In verse 5, Mind tries to justify himself, saying that it brings him no pleasure to do this, but it is what must be done, because Heart refuses to understand him. The hypocrisy here is obviously that neither of them want to understand each other, with Mind thinking that emotions are useless and thus equating all of Heart's struggles to mere lies and deceit. I'm just gonna play the chorus in this entirety because it's the most popular part of the song and it bangs. All but stating he is the only perfect thing in this vessel. In the outro, it seems like he's closing in on Heart, but just before he can carry out his plan, in comes the Soul Electric. So, as I've been alluding to, Soul is actually the most powerful among the three, but his desire for everyone to communicate and work out their issues causes him to resist intervening. I mean, that is, until one of your homies is about to kill the other. This power is demonstrated in the very first line of the song, "Call me the Soul," or "Call me my name." This confirms any wavering doubts about Soul's true identity. Soul is Jash, or at least the representation of him that the Heart and Mind can see. Soul has the closest connection with the host because Soul is the host, and that's why I've been saying the only one with the actual ability to injure the vessel is him. In the following verses, Heart and Mind continue to squabble, talking over each other in order to try to explain the sides of the argument to Soul. Soul, however, says that neither of them are in the right or in the wrong in this situation, and that all this fighting is doing is murdering the host faster. He tells them that they're being arrogant to even think one could run the vessel without the other, and furthermore that either could control him. This stretch of lyrics ends with Mind and Heart saying condemn him to the infirmary. Many believe they're just yelling at each other again, but I see it as their last-ditch effort to exude power over the Soul by trying to condemn or banish him, but obviously to no avail. It is here that the listener realizes, regardless of which side they had a personal bias towards, that Heart and Mind are one and the same when boiled down to their fundamentals, and they both have no authority over the raw power of a human soul. Undertale reference. After our three characters enter a downward spiral of thoughts and emotion, they come together, just briefly saying, I am me. Now this is intended to give the audience a glimmer of hope that all is not for naught. Soul then launches into a tangent in the chorus about how hard he works in order to keep everything held together, and that while Mind and Heart work so hard they exhaust themselves, they are exhausting him as well. We all know at this point that for as much as Heart and Mind hate each other, they both love Soul and wish to protect him, so this is probably a huge reality check. He recounts what he has witnessed, watching the Mind play around and seeing both parties make the dissonance worse, and it's all caused Soul a very real identity crisis that he reveals when he says, "Someone help me understand what's going on behind my eyes. Doctor, I can't tell if I'm not me." In the second chorus, Heart and Mind continue to talk over each other, one seething with anger from above while one snarls below in disgust. Soul is so sick of it, and he realizes that they aren't even listening to him, exclaiming, "See how they fight all day? The other half won't hear what's had to say. It's just the game they play here in this labyrinth maze." Soul has one more ace up his sleeve that just might get the other two to cooperate. Like I said, he will do anything to be whole again, so he threatens the worst. It works. The room goes silent as he finishes the songs with
Tridential regicide, I won't hesitate to kill my heart and mind.
Yup. It took Soul threatening to take the life of the host and take everyone down with him to finally get through the bickering parties, and now the bidding can begin. This starts the Tridential Sovereignty Saga. The Bidding is a song where the heart finally stands up to Mind with items other than a literal gun. Yes, the two have agreed to talk it out, which at first devolves into fighting. Also, I wanted to note that before this point, Heart hadn't really gotten angry or called Mind anything to his face. When he did say anything about Mind, it was more by means of monologue or aside, and he was entirely melancholy about the whole thing. But now Heart, tiring of hearing Mind tell him he's a liar every single time he tries to speak up and explain himself, he says this.
And here he is, a piece of shit, sitting, seething high atop his stolen throne. Glass, the house of the hypocrite, and yet you still continue arming stone.
Among profanity, Heart calls Mind one important thing: a hypocrite. This is the first time it's really registering to anyone that these two have the very same problem. Heart, when he ran the vessel, was neglectful of Mind's input, causing dissonance. However, now that Mind is in the control seat, he's doing the exact same thing. If you think about it, they've both been subjecting each other to physical violence and abuse for years over the same fundamental problem. They just aren't listening to each other, and they're finally starting to realize it. Back to the song, after Heart's big outburst, Soul begins to believe that all is lost, saying they'll tie the noose today, because the other two won't put on the get-along shirt. At this, Heart and Mind begin to plead with the Soul, saying they've been agonizing ceaselessly since the other side came around. This pleading devolves into them saying two completely different things at the same time, with no regard for the other party like what has happened before. Though strangely this time they find themselves accidentally coming together at random moments. Soul takes this accidental cooperation as a sign that all is not lost. He realizes that the ingredients are there, they just need to work on this whole listening thing. He implores them to just try hearing one another out one more time for him. They agree, hesitant but relieved to get another chance at life. Here comes the song called Light. I kind of like to imagine this song taking place with the three sitting in a circle and finally letting one another speak. The song starts with Hart stating his piece. Hart claims that he tried to keep a light on and let Mind at least have some say in the vessel, but that Mind responded by eclipsing or icing him out. Hart didn't take Mind's invalidation of his feelings lightly as it tore him at the seams. From there, Hart's mental illness and perception of Mind worked together and made his outlook on life become bleak and distorted and altogether not worth it, causing him to grow even more lazy in Mind's eyes. Mind then calmly speaks his piece. He saw the path the vessel was going down and feared that Jash would grow more and more fatigued by the weight of his emotions, so he tried to take matters into his own hands, refusing to listen to Hart at all. He claims that the pain would be better if turned into kinetic energy or work and productivity. Because he holds such little regard for emotion as anything more than a tool, he figured that Hart's misery was nothing but a facade to keep him in control. Soul, happy that they seem to finally be talking healthily, says that they've earned their chance at survival and all they have to do is keep being vulnerable with each other so that the lines can be blurred between their points of view and they can be whole again. In Mind's second verse, he begins by trying to justify his coldness, saying that every minute spent being emotional is a minute spent not working. However, after that, he finally concedes something. He asks Hart to help him understand this life that they lead. He is open to the idea that he cannot do everything himself, and he hopes to hear Hart's perspective in order for everything to finally make sense. In Hart's second verse, he first tries to justify his humble disposition, saying that humility is a virtue, but after this he also concedes something. He admires Mind's resilience in the face of adversity. Even when Hart shot at him, he did not waver. He stood his ground and he didn't crumble like Hart admits he would have. Here we see that both clearly need each other to balance everything out. Without Hart, Mind is nothing but a cynical, stubborn, emotionless workaholic, but without Mind, Hart is nothing but a weak, fatigued coward. Alone, they aren't so pretty, but together they could blend into something and make it beautiful. After a verse where they promise to heal what they've broken, it finally happens. The whole is introduced. He realizes that he still has a lot to do, but he is capable of being him now. The next song is called We're Gonna Win, and this song is sung by the whole, but still has Mind and Hart features. This is to show that while yes, nothing is perfect yet, Mind and Hart are actively working to combine their views into something more gray as opposed to black and white. Verse 1 and 2 consist of the whole, or actually I'm just gonna call him Jash now, talking about how his life is a whirlwind of emotions, stress, romance, and even nightmarish elements due to only the goings-on of his own brain. However, he still has hope for himself. He believes that he's gonna win despite all these hardships and live a fulfilling life. Jash sings about the insurmountable expectations of others and of himself. He sings about how it feels sometimes as if he's just faking in order to convince those around him that he's better than he really is. But despite it all, he's going to win. He's going to create his own confidence. He will not lose the battle with his inner demons, and instead he will live a long life as opposed to one cut short at his own hand. The song is a triumph over everything he's faced in the past, and a laugh in the face of everything he has yet to encounter. To Wuv seems to be a double down of We're Gonna Win, and the lyrics go so incredibly hard. The first verse is Jash describing what just happened and how he was so close to ending his life, but he stopped himself at the 11th hour out of stubbornness or spite. Verse 2 then goes more in depth about how he felt faced with this eternal war. He said that though it almost ripped him apart, that Mind and Hart now run right by his side. I also thought that it was worth noting that he describes Mind and Hart as the freaks I love to hate. Freak is a very common word used in this album to drive the point home that splits aren't a normal occurrence for everyone, but despite that, he still loves these parts of himself that are always fighting. The bridge is backwards and scrambled, but when deciphered it says, "If God or the devil or any other all-powerful cowardly being has a problem with who I am, then I implore them to take their fucking shot." Now this line, obviously it goes hard as fuck, but it also proves that Jash doesn't actually fear death as long as he himself is himself until the very end. He didn't refuse to end his life out of fear, remember, but instead out of spite. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker for shit like this, and it's badass as fuck. On the subject of God, I believe Jash uses the next verse to bring back methods he used to try and cope with his inner turmoil. He says, Father Saint and Mary, I hope you understand, but your sermons are fucked and I need to take a stand, because I think that you've been playing it wrong. I've come around 1,000 times, but I'm still singing this song. This implies that when Jash was younger, he tried to use religion as a means to quiet his inner struggles and keep himself whole, whether that be for himself or because of his parents, as we'll later learn. However, that didn't work for him at all, and now he believes it all to be a pack of lies. He now knows that the only way to face these demons is head on. Pun intended. I'm going to recite verse 3 in its entirety because it explains the existence of this album. I wrote a couple rhymes over tunes I didn't write, in an attempt to reconcile what keeps me up at night, but as ideas began to grow and the track list followed suit, the halves I once revealed had finally settled their dispute. He wrote this album as a way to contextualize his feelings. He didn't do it for clout, money, or fame. He simply spent 547 hours on this album as an outlet, and it worked. And honestly, that's real as hell. Why do any of us do art? It's for that exact reason. And then he comes to accept that he'll always be a divided man, which is okay, because it means he's being genuine. Speaking of being genuine, Jash comes out in this song. He also condemns religion because he is queer and he's damned anyway. Honestly, this song is just about radical self-acceptance in the face of a broken system and an even more broken world. Despite all that's been held against him, he refuses to be the person his parents eulogize. And that goes so fucking hard. I don't even know what to say. The next song is Variations on a Cloud, and fun fact, I love the original to this song. I love it so much that I wrote a 5-page paper on this song alone. Thankfully though, I won't be doing that here because this script is already 42 pages long, but I do appreciate Jash for putting it in this album because it's often forgotten about due to its darker history, which I may cover in a future video. I probably will cover it in a future video. The lyrics are largely unchanged, so when they are different, it stands out all the more. This song is essentially about mind, heart, and soul finally being at peace with one another, saying that all good things come in threes. They make more mentions to being forced to pray as a child and other hardships that they had been subjected to at the hands of not only outside forces, but each other. However, as they're gently floating through the air, finally together again, they're finally ready to turn over a new leaf. You know, a lot of people give Jash flack for turning Tally Hall songs sad, which, like, bro, have you listened to Tally Hall? But in any case, this is one example of where he actually makes the source material happier, especially considering that the original song was about two people jumping off the World Trade Center during 9/11, all seen through the eyes of a dejected and desensitized teenager. I'm sorry, I just had to shoehorn that in there. That was a special interest a while ago. Anyway, we're here for The Whole World and You, which is the outro from Cacophony. The first half of this song remains largely the same, but we get more context about the future of the story in the second half. Chonny sings about how making covers was actually what helped him merge dark and light. Mine jokingly teases Hart about the fact that he took his sweet time becoming one again, and Jash remains hopeful, even if he knows it's not quite yet alright. At least he isn't split anymore. At the end of this song, Jash is paying homage to the colory group that inspired this album, citing it as a eulogy to a now gone group, which enters us into the final saga, the Concord Saga, which starts with Welcome to Tally Hall, Intro to Concord. Our boy Chonny is rapping again, and this time it's to explain why this album exists in the first place. He describes it as misanthropic, which means it's the act of having disdain for humankind and avoiding society. I kind of take it to mean that this album was an agoraphobic effort since it took so much time for one man to pull off alone. He then pokes fun at himself, saying he's bastardizing all of Tally Hall's best songs and making them worse. Obviously, by the video you're watching, you can tell that I don't think that's true, but it's a large criticism that's been thrown his way. The thing is, he knew he was going to get criticism. He was self-aware of the niche he was engaging with in making this album, and he simply does not care. He didn't make this album for anyone but himself, so he doesn't care how it's received. He claims that he's doing this so that the world doesn't forget Tally Hall, but also for quote-unquote egotistical reasons, though I don't really know how that could be true because he also says he has no intention of making money off the album, so I'm not sure how that's an example of egotism. The hardest bar in this song by far is this. I'm stereosonic, I'm animatronic, I'm fucking with the chords, heteroharmonic. Bro, who comes up with that? Anyway, the next song is Banana Man. Banana Man is a song that is definitely a more sordid part of Tally Hall's past. It's well, it has themes that are very racist perceptionally. It's a music video that features the members of the band using Caribbean accents and wearing makeup that is very eerily similar to that of minstrel blackface. Since Jash has already claimed this album was partially tribute to Tally Hall, he decides to set the record straight on how he feels about this song personally, since a lot of Tally Hall fans either like to vehemently defend it or deny its existence. He believes that it is racist, and anyone claiming that it's just a joke or looks at it only through nostalgic, rose-colored lenses needs to reevaluate their position. See, it's Jash's belief that part of being a fan of something is not holding it on such a high pedestal and also being able to realize its more problematic themes. As somebody who's a fan of things like Danganronpa, I totally see where he's coming from here. There are parts of the games that are racist, transphobic, and straight up just not okay, and trying to justify any of that is simply nonsense. This Jash song takes a very interesting and nuanced position on what it means to be a fan of something, though outwardly not condoning all of its parts. It's something that I believe we all need to keep in mind so that we don't get sucked into this echo chamber of radical justification. The next song in this album is Haiku, which is probably one of my favorite songs in Concord. We now enter everyone's favorite and least complicated part of life, dating. See, Mr. Jash is having a problem. He has a little crush on someone and he wants to show his appreciation through means of poetry, specifically of the 575 variety. But for the life of him, he can't find the right words in such a limited syllabic format. This is most likely mind being confused as to how one would fit such large feelings into such a tiny frame, but then he comes up with this absolute banger of a poem. Kind, sweet, and charming, voluptuously endowed, hair a darkened brown. I guess Jash just likes them thick brunettes, I don't know. But anyway, right before he's about to deliver this lady killer, he gets stabbed. He thinks it's just his curvaceous lover that stabbed him, but he realized that no, he stabbed himself. Now, he didn't literally get stabbed, but a combination of heart's nerves and mind's perfectionism stopped him from confessing his feelings. He shot himself in the foot and decided he needs to go back to the drawing board if he's going to be successful in the art of woman wooing. So back to the drawing board he goes in Hidden in the Sand. This one is honestly real as fuck. Jash spends a wonderful night with this person he has a crush on, and by the way, I am gonna say girl and she in these couple of songs because though I don't know what gender this person is that Jash is talking about, because they could be any gender, it says her and she in the original songs, so I'm just gonna stick with that and just know that it's ambiguous. But Jash spends this wonderful night with this girl he has a crush on and decides to go home and write her a song in order to confess his feelings, since, hey, songs are what he does best. He spent a long time trying to write this song, but much like the haiku, he couldn't get it just right. Because of his rather shadowy disposition, he said that every goddamn lyric seemed to be twisted, creepy, and dark. As someone who struggles to write happy songs myself, I feel this so hard.
I don't blame you if you think I'm wrong. When I was you, I guarantee I sang a different song. But I'm tired, no I don't feel like debating. This shit gets frustrating. No, I'm just simply saying that I just want to sleep without the flames on my skin. No, don't let him in, I'm rotted with sin.
At the end of the day, he not only does not show his crush the song, but cuts her off altogether, because he's convinced himself that she'd never want to be seen with him as her man anyway, and that he would just be rejected and laughed at. He also laments the fact that Heart's shot at Mind wasn't successful, because without Mind's perfectionism, perhaps he would have been able to write something good in his eyes. This is the first hint of dissonance reappearing in Chonny's mind, and honestly, this song is just so sad. To everyone watching out there, this is a sign to shoot your shot. If you've made it this far in the video, this is your sign. Whoever your crush is, shoot your shot, okay? Because I was also in a position where I thought I was batting way outside my strike zone, and because I took a chance, we now have been dating for 1.5 years. In other words, he let me hit because I'm goofy. Alright, our next song is Greener, and this is one of my absolute favorite Tally Hall songs. This is also the first one I send to people who want to get into Tally Hall's music but don't know where to start. It's a really good starting point for anybody that you're recommending the band to. But Jash takes the grass is greener metaphor in this song as the inspiration for his rendition. For him, it's a song about internet culture. Other people envy him for the fame he's gotten from these covers and originals, but what they don't understand is that the cost for creativity, for him anyways, is mental illness and struggles. And furthermore, since he's so vulnerable about his struggles, there are many people who criticize him for being too dark and depressed, when music is his outlet and he really can't help how he sees the world as a depressed person. It's essentially a message of, if you envy me, don't. If you hate me, you're annoying. A noticeable part in this song is when Jash says he's feeling alright, and for once, Mind contradicts him, saying, "for now." Possibly foreshadowing a future split because of this rapidly mounting stress in his real life. Jash has begun to doubt himself again, and that's always a recipe for disaster, leading us into Special. Now, I love Special because it's a Joe Hawley song that isn't part of Hawaii Part 2, and there's a very good reason why it was included in this album. It's about self-doubt. In the original, Hawley feels like perhaps he's not interesting as all the other people trying to become performers and therefore doesn't deserve fame at all. The first half of the song's lyrics are largely the same as the original, but in the second half it gets much more interesting. Jash starts to spiral once again. He believes he's lying to everyone, embellishing his talent and abilities, and it's eating at him. He has imposter syndrome. He can no longer deny he is miserable, and the once confident, fearless, unshakable Jash is again reverting into an unwound psyche of self-hatred and harsh criticism. The outro of this song brings back the bridge of Variations on a Cloud with the line, "Keep it coming back." I believe that, as juxtaposed by the original intent of this line, this is heart, mind, and soul realizing that no matter what they do, this dissonance will keep coming back. Despite Jash's best efforts, he is slowly unraveling, feeding into the cycle again. Taken for a ride. Here we are, guys, the final song in the album. This has been such a fulfilling project for me, and though it isn't perfect, I hope everyone who's made it this far into the video finds at least some takeaway. After all, my intentions are not to tell you how things are, but rather to share my own musings and again, start a conversation. This song starts by again paying homage to Tally Hall, and then by recounting our journey thus far. I will read verse 2 in its entirety. Next the stranded cynic sits and toils, his fits and foils written slowly, nothing's holy. Emotion versus cognition, trial, the pathos, logos, vision. This explosion of devotion, lonely, sulking halves that wanted just a taste of closure to implore them to start living. 30 hours each with minimal outreach, not for sale, for fun. It's free, friend, come to the deep end. Chorus 1 explains that the chemistry is gone, implying that Jash is about to enter another cycle of cacophony, or inevitably will in the future. Verse 3 explains that Jash did this as a passion project, in order to give onlookers a view of his distorted mind. The verse ends with him admitting that this is too much work for any sane person to put into anything just for fun, with an Australian accented Jesus Christ mate thrown in at the end, signifying how those around him reacted to his excursion. Honestly, guys, the biggest reveal to me in this entire album is that Jash is Australian. I'm just kidding, of course. Or am I? Chorus 2 tells the listener that though he is very happy with this album, he will understandably need to take a bit of a break after seeing its completion. Again, I can't say I blame him. This man literally spent 547 hours having conversations with his personal demons and writing them into Tally Hall songs. If that isn't some hands-on therapy, I have no fucking clue what is. Verses 4 and 5 are also something I'll read in entirety because it just sums up all of his feelings about this project so gorgeously. There are no secrets anymore, I've laid them all out on the floor. They're all for you. You want something? You know more about me than my family. All these sick, unsightly maladies, staving off the due insanity, haptic feedback, half-baked blasphemies, 27 songs are yours, my blood, my sweat, my open doors. I've hurt, reviled, and reconciled 500 fucking hours, and I'm finally getting bored. This story isn't over. I'm not sure that it's begun. But I'd just like to spend some more time enjoying being one. My quill is dry, my flat line nigh, my tears arranged and poured, and yet you still want for more? Yes, though there was fear in the beginning of another cycle happening, Jash made it out. For now. The end of the song closes with a quote from Marvin Yagoda, the founder of Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. In this quote, he talks about the importance of starting things with no certain end goal in mind, just like how Jash started this album. He honestly didn't even expect it to be an album at first, and yet here it is. Gorgeous, dark, hopeful, and all his. Better yet, we received the privilege of being able to make it ours in a way. Chonny Jash, if you ever see this video, I want to tell you this. You have helped so many people with your art and vulnerability. There are more people in the world who feel seen because of you. I can't speak for Marvin, but I was around for both the release of Hawaii Part 2 and this album, and I've seen them both change people's lives in similar ways. Chonny, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for your wonderful music and insight into the weight of the mind. And to all of you, thank you for watching.